Hi there, my name's Doug Thrower, and I am one of the music designers for the Bluecoats.
Hi, I'm Dean Westman, and I am the program coordinator for the Bluecoats.
And I'm John Vanderkolff, artistic director and visual designer for the Bluecoats.
Hopefully.
That's awesome.
Still?
Yeah. Where are we in our 22 spring training process, right? And as far as where we're at this year, we were just talking about this at lunch, and that this experience, this show, this process reminds me of kind of where we would be back in the 14, 15, 16, before the world ended in 2019. It does feel more like that. So we have what, 5-ish, 6-ish minutes of show out there,
Yeah.
A couple of weeks into the experience. It's hard for me to put it in specifics other than to say, 30 years in, when I look at it, it feels like what a drum corps should look like at the beginning of June, what they should sound like as far as where they're at in the process. It feels very much like the last couple of years didn't happen in that sense. It feels like a normal drum corps spring training. So that makes me really happy. That's a very safe place for me to feel like things like before BC, before COVID.
Well, I'd say some of the characteristics would be the stress. To be straight up, it's the figuring things out with everybody, which is new every year. Even though how many times you do drum corps every year, it feels new group of people around, and for some reason, I don't know, it's a bad memory, but it just feels new. Like working through ideas, and sometimes it takes a lot. Sometimes they go pretty easily. It's that kind of feeling. It's the building of camaraderie. The building like we're all going towards one goal. When we come in, that takes a little bit of time to really, you can say it, but to really understand what that means. And I feel like by, what are we, the second week now? Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's really taken stride over the last, probably 3 or 4 days. More and more of the performers are understanding what it is and are kind of, buying into it and be part of the process. I think that also goes to their confidence. Of coming along with this whole thing too. Yeah.
I think it's different for me and for Dean because John and Jim are on the ground creating every day. So they're seeing, slow change. For Dean and I, we come in and we're like the grandparents. We come in and say, oh my gosh, you've grown so big since last time I saw you. Last night I was delighted at Ensemble because I thought the whole group has matured in the last week, like surprisingly. So that's kind of one nice thing about being a weekend warrior is you do see the growth, and I think it's important, especially for the members, because they're right in the middle of it, so they don't necessarily understand how much they're improving, right? So yeah, obviously the work that John and Jim are doing is amazing, and I'm really, really pleased with how it's coming together.
And the other thing when I say how this reminds me of back then, there's always an experimental nature of spring training, especially with John and Jim and watching how they do it, just what their process is. But even in the 2019, there was always the safety net. It was a pressure to it, but there was the safety net of the Beatles. And so even from a kid's standpoint, you might be learning the craziest, most experimental concept choreographically or conceptually, but you're playing Eleanor Rigby. You could fall back on things like that, as a kid. Where this is, we're talking about, we really haven't gotten into show title and stuff with the performers yet. They're flying blind, and that's how it was back in 15 and 16. There was this experimental nature, but kind of the no emotional safety net. You just have to trust each other, the performers have to trust the instructors and designers. It's got to go all those ways. And I think those are the feelings, and anxiety is a big part of it, but it's those feelings of we're building the plane as we're flying the plane, and we don't have the sanctity of, hey Jude, or something like that. You have to fall back on that we're doing a show that you can't say like, hey, we're playing Blackbird, that people, if my dad goes, what are you playing this year? The first thing I have to say is, well, it's a bunch of music you've never heard of before, but it's great. Yeah. And that's what it was like back in those years. You have to kind of see it to get it.
Sure. I think part of the team building too and the bonding is kind of built into that experimental nature because the members and the students are involved in that. Last night John was working on one of our wheel props and working it out in real time. So the kids are part of that creative process, and I think that's going to make them more invested you know, in the long run in their own personal performance, what they contribute.
Yeah, that's what I've learned from John and kind of that blast philosophy, if you will, coming from my background, especially my background as a Texas band director. Everything, you know, I would plan out when I'm going to the bathroom. So everything was meticulously planned out, and you did this, you learned. And when John first came on board with the Troopers, that took a big level of trust, I think, on the Troopers with the Bluecoats.
I missed that era.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've got bad news for you.
Well, you know, Doug and I did work for the Doug and I did work for the Troopers. But
That's
no,
right. Doug still works.
But you
for
know
the
what I'm saying?
Troopers.
Like when you came on board, there was for me there was an element of this is a more organic process, but not in a it wasn't thought out way. It's so thought out, and it's so. But you can't. I don't know if John and Jim could do what they do on a computer per se. They can put. I think it seems like you put enough to explain, but it has to. You know, there's something that is like the ancient art of passing it down to, you know, the way you would like a sorcerer's apprentice kind of approach to it. And now I just can't imagine seeing it done a different way here. When you've seen it done this way. Now, having said that, it takes years off their lives, I'm sure, doing it. But for me and Doug sitting up in the cheap seats, being, you know, grandpa and watching it, it is. You do come back week after week, and like their feet are more under them. There's more ownership in the product, and it's really, so yeah, it feels like the good old days to me.
So when you go through that stuff, you have an idea, you have an image of what a progression could be, whether it's a set piece or an idea, you know, a visual idea or a musical idea or interpreting the musical idea, you know, that chunk of something like that. So you come up with a bunch of images, and you sort of have them strung together, but you have to allow for them, you know, to come to life themselves. Usually one thing leads to the next. In some of the things what you guys saw last night, it was there's all kinds of problem solving. So as often is the case here, we have these great big ideas, and so much of the time is spent problem solving those great big ideas, I think. So you go out there with the initial idea, you try it, it doesn't quite work, and you're constantly with a group of people, and you're trying to go, well, what about this way, what about this way, what about that way, you know, and you pass it around, and you keep trying things, and sometimes it's the performers that come with the, you know, the solution to it, or you see them do something, go, oh, I didn't know, you know, that you could do that. Performers could do that in the end, and they can. So, which is kind of cool. It's allowing yourself, although you're a little afraid, you know, whether or not the whole idea is going to work, trying to push that aside and just staying on task and going, okay, we got so many great people here and great performers here. We're going to put all our energy into this, you know, and something is bound to happen because I've been doing this long enough to know that it usually does. You know, it's that.
Yeah, this is another thing Doug and I were talking about this afternoon at lunch, is it's one of the reasons also that we take the approach we take where we don't really share what our stuff is publicly. There's no competitive reason, and there's no marketing reason. It's I want to give these guys every second of every minute of every hour of every day to figure the stuff out without the pressure of you write a show blurb that lists a million expectations and here's what the show is. And 2016 is such a great example that I use where we didn't figure out the great gig in the sky element until really like now-ish or May-ish for sure.
They didn't read it till.
Yeah, we didn't. Yeah, and that was one of the best parts of that show. Now, if we would have released something else and then changed it to that, it would have come across like, well, they just don't have their act together, and maybe we didn't. But it's this search for, and so when you're watching a moment like that where John's taking something very next level and producing it with Jim into a choreographed event, my first reaction is my mind is exploding, just because it's another one of those things that those guys came up with something that's like, yep, I've never seen that before. Like when I looked at that last night, the choreography in that moment when they come in, and my same reaction when that tune, that Anna Meredith Nautilus was first played Labor Day weekend or whatever, we were in September, or within 30 seconds of hearing that, I just remember like, I don't even care what the show is. That's got to be in this show. It's great. And we all had concerns along the way. And when you see it now and how the kids are responding to it, and then when you see what these guys have dreamed up, when it's in that moment, whether it's going perfectly right or they are problem solving, I want to back off, shut my mouth, and watch and learn and watch them figure that out, because there's nothing I can provide to help that situation other than like moral support. And they're so good at it. And we haven't put any pressure on it. Like we do try to live in a bubble here where if that didn't work out, then we'd come up with, okay, what else can we do with that shtick? And we've had to do that in every one of our shows. You see what's possible. You see what the kids can do. There's always something they bring to the table that you didn't know they could do, musically or from a performance standpoint. But I tend to sit in awe, and then on the day after, we really do try to just give John the space to do it, to produce that moment, because, and that's one of the things I love about us is our instructional staff very much gets that. Yeah. There's a lot of people that are just, you're so territorial about your time with the kids and whatever, and here, if they can see, like, that's gonna be worth it. Spend time on that. That's gonna be worth it. There's a real all for one, one for all. If it helps all of us, it helps my caption, your caption, whatever. One core, one score.
Yeah. It's a narrative piece, but just like a different kind of narrative. It's not forcing a story, it just kind of is, you know, and then during pockets of each paragraph or each stanza, I guess, I don't know what you'd say, he and the drum set player are just improvising on it, and on this just cool sound. Like, I swear the whole song doesn't have any real pitch. You know, it's rather amazing to me. But it was the concept, and it took us a while to come around that, you know, the actual narration, it was the concept we were after, but that took a while to understand that the narration of that song was actually hugely a creative opportunity for
that was
us.
the hook
You know what I
that drew
mean?
us.
It was that, because at first it was just the idea, and we can come up with our own narration, kind of boring this thing, and then it ended up becoming, well, this narration is beautiful. What I love about it is it's not, again, it's not overbearing. It's just a laid back kind of story about this crazy dream this guy had, and it brings in some, you know, human condition and stuff like that, but it's not saying, you know, feel this or feel that. It's just kind of natural.
It's great word painting, and then you pair that up with what the brilliant scenic design, and then what these guys are doing. And so, like the moment, getting back to what we were talking to, I think when you see how it's just another layer of composition, just like when we added an electronic voice, you had to you couldn't think of it anymore as a brass book and a drum book. I mean, you got to think of it as a score. So just like if we had a score that had a spoken word opera, you know, has that, and certainly the Brad Meldau had that, and you know, Aaron Copland's used spoken word. You know, it's not like this is a new concept. The idea of kind of a beat poetry set to music, it just drew us in, just every bit about it. And then the phone tunes, we kind of
imagery too. You know, and it spoke to Michael and to Greg, the set designer and the costume designer. You know, about just a new way. I mean, as you guys will see, it's like a whole new way of both of those, of scenic and once again with uniform costume for drum corps. You know, which, you know, so that's a win-win when those guys are that fired up that they can see a whole different world for this.
And we've done this before, where you're either finding something. In 2016, it was that group Motion House. They were a contemporary dance company that would do recitals on Caterpillar tractors or on the side of a wall or whatever.
Crazy,
and it was interactive, and that kind of drove the downside up aesthetic. With this one, with the Riffs and Revelations, it's the Marfa, Texas we started talking about really early, in these towns where you'll just see like the Cadillac Ranch just in the middle of a field, art. And we did a little research on the Ant Farm, which is the group of artists that came from San Francisco down to Marfa to put, you know, there's some iconic stuff there. And we don't do any of that literally, but those are the things that kind of inspire then. And that's really how 2016 felt as well. It was like, well, that visually and that, you know, and then you create something cool and new.
It's tying together a bunch of different things that, you know, you hope for that. You get a whole bunch of ideas, and those ideas that can kind of string together, you know, it kind of makes sense.
This one's been fun.
This one's fun because the narrative kind of drove the emotional arc of the show, and fortunately, it's a good arc, you know. So it has been fun.
It really is.
And but John kind of mentioned this at the beginning, but truth be told, we have had a little more time to think about this one than the others, because while Lucy was usually when we're in a project, we do not. But while Lucy was going on, we had talked about this. Like we'd sat on.
It's the last piece, the garden.
The garden piece. Yeah, like there's pieces we had looked at.
Was actually going to be performed a couple years ago.
Yeah, so we were able to. Where some people I think did whatever they were going to do with COVID, we went with the Act 2 route, and then we kept talking about this. Musically, we were listening to Brad Meldau definitely while Beatles was happening. But I don't remember if it was with an idea. It was more. I remember being in Siesta Key with Hardiman and playing some of Brad Meldau with just not saying anything, and he was just sitting there at the beach. He goes, "That's awesome. What is that?" And I just remember, like, and pause, and then I just said, "I'm not going to tell you anything other than that will be Bluecoats." And I didn't give him composer or name or anything, but just I would do that just to feel like, does he think this is cool as I think it is? So that was definitely while the Lucy thing was still happening. But I don't
He's
remember.
always a good gauge for
Yeah,
us.
I don't remember. Yeah, I don't
Yes.
remember putting getting more into the conceptual talk. I think until after the Lucy stuff and
Well,
more
it
this.
took a
Yeah.
ways to figure it
Yeah.
out. It really did. It wasn't a straight path, at least
It
at all.
never is.
Just some of the music was, we knew that we wanted to do it, and it led to other pieces and other pieces that, that's just been a great ride, really.
Yep. Yeah. So as far as how we just dive in all together to get at this, the game has definitely changed in our careers from what this. I think about what drum corps design was and what it is, and it's not part-time anymore. It feels very full-time. So I will transparently tell you that as far as our process, at the end of a season, we give ourselves only about 2 weeks that we don't see each other and or talk, but there still is even talking. And then end of August, we crank it right back up. And every year since we've been together, we do weekly calls, like every Tuesday night. We're all on the Zoom together, whether it's in season, out of season, whatever. And I will tell you, like, just setting that kind of foundation in itself helps the process, because you never stop. You don't have to get into kind of that getting to know you phase. And there's a consistency with this team. This is easy for all of me to say this because I don't have to write a note. I don't have to stage it. I don't have to. But I think the way we do it, and there's just a trust that we've all been here long enough, and some drum corps is going to win, and somebody's going to finish second and third and so on. But we don't think like that, and we're going to do what we think is the next cool thing to do. And then somebody's going to say it's that, and then we move on. So I just want to mention that, because you get into the process about how we create and how we get into the headspace and do whatever. But the bottom line is, with this group, is there is a sense of safety and family and consistency and trust and all that. And so there's a lot of time it's what we don't have to spend time on after a season that I think about a lot, that I know in a lot of organizations you have to, as you turn over and you try to reinvent. And I think we do a good job of just, and next, what's the next thing that's exciting? And we don't have to think in terms of what our alumni base demands of us, or what, so we're really, really blessed in that way. And then once the process starts, it does not stop. I think there's certain people who kind of quarterback it during more, certain part. John clearly, is artistic director is not a ceremonial title with the Bluecoats. I'm the Queen of England, if anything. But to watch how he can steer a conversation in a positive way, for me, is really, really cool, especially when you're just getting going. Because what do? Do you just start playing tunes? Do you just start talking about stuff? And I think we do a really good job of kind of just going around and just seeing what people are excited about. Yeah. And it's not necessarily a tune or a movie, or it can be anything, and it can be nothing. And I think we try to start, though, with kind of a blank canvas and a level of trust and understanding that you're able to go like, okay, what's the next album we're gonna make? Not what's the next direction that we have to go to follow this set of rules or whatever.
Right.
We have the luxury of enjoying each other's company too, like even Dean's. And
appreciate that.
So a lot of the stuff really happens. I mean, we have our formal meetings and everything, but it's kind of amazing what happens over a meal somewhere or in the car together. Today, like Dean and I have been together all day, and the process is so organic. The ideas just flow once we're together. Because there's a trust circle here that's it's pretty special. There's nobody there that's going to shut the scene down with a no.
I think a lot of it is there's so many different ideas, whether it's music or conceptually or visually or anything like that, and the fact that you try to find the thing that is the most curious for everybody. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? If you can tell if Doug's like, nah, something, or Tom or Michael Rayford, or you know what I mean, or Jim, you know, those are all good gauges, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, maybe part of this, but not that, and stuff like that, and you try to find the thing that everybody goes, oh, that's cool. You can usually tell, you know what I mean? Sometimes some of us, it takes a little longer to come around to it, but we also, you know, we have enough experience designing together that we're able to live in that space without worrying about it too much. Like sometimes we take a really long time before it all kind of solidifies, you know, but I don't know.
No, and there's lessons I learn every year. There's examples of the same reminder lessons I get every year. One of the big ones this year is, and I think few people have mentioned this, is, you know, going into knowing you're not doing the Beatles, what you don't want to do is have something that is like just so intellectualized that it can't connect with people. Yeah. And there's always that fear when you're doing new music. And when I use words like experimental, and we were saying when we were with the fellows, it's like when I was in college and you were going to experimental music concerts, like, okay, so there's going to be me and two other people there, and it's going to be a monkey banging on a hammer,
patches
you
on
know,
the
playing,
elbows,
yeah, and so what's cool about that I learn every year, because this was a show where when we were first conceptually talking about it, and you're listening to some minimalistic music and, you know, some different stuff, I'm like, is the crowd gonna, you know, how's this gonna work? Is this gonna connect? And then when I'll hear a fully realized chart, I called John last week, I'm like, we could do John Cage, 3 minutes and 44 seconds, which is, what is it? Is that what that's called? The one that's all silence.
411.
Yeah, you probably have that album.
I don't know. I do. I just can't remember how the length of it.
But Doug and Tom are going to make it hip, and they're like, they would make that. They'd make John Cage swing. Yeah. They would make it cool, and so we're able to look at any kind of repertoire and not just hear it and go, that's what the Barber's First Symphony would sound like. But it's like, well, what would that sound like if Doug messed with that? And everything we do, I think there's always this excitement of, well, it's not going to sound like that, and I like that, but what will that sound like when these guys do their thing?
I can tell you one thing it's going to sound like: longer.
For me, it's the opposite, actually. I like Dean, sometimes I worry about coming off as too abstract or intellectual. But I think 14 cemented this for me, especially, is that because a lot of our music was not well known that year, somewhat obscure. Yeah. But the way John and Jim, you know, present it, you know, the activity is at its best when you're seeing what you hear. Yeah. And like every year since they arrived, the music has been elevated by the visual presentation of it, including Michael's work with the sets and Greg's work with the costumes. I mean, the Beatles thing's a great example, because maybe Tom was last guy in, but I was second last. Yeah. Because I was just, oh my God, like there's, what did I call it? It's like a Sunday afternoon drive in Iraq. There's a booby trap around every corner. And then Greg showed the costumes. I was like, oh boy, we're going to be doing the Beatles. Here we go, because I mean, what those guys did to elevate the music, you know, you have to be all in at that point.
Always,
you know.
Those moments. Downside Up was so scary until the day we saw that, the first time we saw it in full costume and the kids came from, we just started crying. Dave Glasgow, I started crying, and
there's no crying in drum corps.
There's a lot of crying in drum corps. Why don't you be in my car driving home any weekend? No, but these are all really real emotions at this moment, where there's excitement, anxiety, anticipation of, you know, we find as we're sitting with our fellowship, like, well, what do you guys think? Do you like it? And they're like, you know, because you want feedback. You want, if you think about a Broadway show, they probably go up to Toronto and they workshop it up there and they get feedback. And
preview.
They do previews and they do all that, and we don't get that so much in drum corps. So, I mean, when we're off camera, don't be surprised if I'm like, what do we do there? How do we, because everybody's got a take, and we want, you know, we want to figure it out, and it's exciting, it's scary, it's all of that, all in one.
Yeah. In 16, I remember having this conversation, I think, with John, is the music too, like, stock? Is it too? I was kind of worried about its retro nature, you know, but then you added the other elements to it, and it was just like, it was, you know, fantastic, great experience.
It's crazy the things you worry about.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I'm saying? It's like,
I know.
How many we always go through that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's true. You have all these ideas around, and you find the ones that are curious to everybody on the design team, ideally, you know what I mean? And that's usually the direction to go, you know? And when it's got something that you think can connect with the audience, it can win. That's when you absolutely know. And sometimes it takes a while. you know, and it may not be the part of the show or the thing of the show that you expect. You just have to keep your open mind or your mind open to it to allow it. The other thing I was going to say is, like, all these things, whether it's a set piece or a piece of music, they all take on their own identity. You know what I mean? They really do. We all have an idea, then Tom and Doug and Matt go at it, and it becomes something, and then we start playing with it, it becomes its own thing. It's not really like we're forcing ourselves, you know, to say this is what this is. You know, it all kind of becomes whatever it's going to be, really. Which, yeah, it's serious. It's kind of a cool process. And you get a little nerve-wracking, but it's really cool.
But everybody has an element of ownership in it, from John down to, you know, tuba 64 or whatever. And
no 64.
We cut him yesterday.
Yeah. No, but I mean that. And as you hit road bumps and you hit things that aren't going to work. And with this particular team, there's never going to be drama about that, because in the end, we're going to do what needs to be done and what's best. And nobody, you know, if we were to have something that John has to do that's big and it's not what we talked about, and we talk about it, and that's what the artistic director thinks is nobody's going to be a prima donna about it. We're going to do what we have to do. This is not a group that likes to sit around and point out the problem. It's a group of problem solvers that likes to do it. And I like how John sees it as a puzzle, because that's really what it is. It's trying to find, Philip Glass used to talk about that in the composition process, that, like, he used to say it's there, like running like a river at all times. You just got to kind of find it, you know, you got to find it. And so, like, this show, it's hard, you know, you just keep chipping away the block until you see what you're trying to sculpt at.
Just reminded me of that kind of, to me, you know, that Ellie movie that just came out, the documentary? Did you see that? It was Bill T. Jones talking about it. It's so much of everything is about finding the form.
It's like divining water.
It's finding the form. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
I think there's a healthy intersection too, though, like from designer to designer. Like, John's a musician first, and Jim was involved in ballet, so he's got a lot of musical knowledge. He was actually a horn player when he marched, I believe.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if Jim feels like, this just feels too long to me, or it's, you know, the pacing's off, it's like, if he feels that way, then the audience is probably going to feel that way too. So I need to, you know, take that into account. And I just think that's really, really healthy, you know. So we, again, as part of the trust thing, it's like, if there's something about the set pieces that's cool that we can, you know, inspire us, you know, to change the music, or if there's something we don't like, we can talk about it and get it out there.
Yeah, and because we communicate so often, and this is how we communicate. I mean, you're seeing what it is. Because I know band directors watch these kind of things, and that it can be calm, it can be, and then when you have to have the tough conversation, it's not like, well, I haven't talked to them in a month, and now, you know, you're talking so often that you don't feel a lot of surprises in that way. You can see, you know, right now Doug is working through the end of the show, and then Tom is going to, you know, so that's where he's living right now. Yeah. But he'll tell you, like, hey, we're doing, like, this is documentary, this is behind the scenes. So, like, this morning, he opened the door, you know, in the apartment, like, how's part 5 coming? You know, like, we yeah. And I know this is going to air after the opening show, but for Tom Rarick, he said that, and today is Sunday, he said it'll be done by the end of Monday, or we can fire him. All right. So did I quote you right on that?
Is that all I have to do?
Yeah. No, but that's how, it's very matter of fact. That's a great example of something in real time. Doug is in the middle of finishing it, and he needs to finish it. And I know it, and he knows it, and we talk about it, but it's not this weird communicative thing. It's two guys who are rooming together in a dorm right now, because he might answer, yeah, I'm done. He might say, like, you know what, I'm thinking about something, can I play it for you? Or what might have happened is, like, this time we actually had a conversation about an idea that we were separately talking about. And so that happens too, we react to each other's stuff.
Well, even seeing part 2 last night,
Yeah.
this is not me attempting to justify my procrastination, because I'm terrible at it, and I'll tell you more about that tomorrow. But
when he's fired and he has time to talk.
But seeing part 2 last night, and we've had discussions about part 5, and there's a short chunk that is spinning around, and it's like, oh, there's something here that I think we could, you know, include. So that's part of the process too, because the movements start to, especially in this show, because of the narrative, I think, and there's not characters on the field, but there's characters in the story. Yeah. So now we can attach melodies or moods to those characters, you know. So that's been kind of cool. Yeah. So.
My favorite part of Doug's process is he'll send a draft of something, And then before any of us can respond within an hour, he rips it apart with 7 things he didn't like about it and sends the second version before I could write back like, sounds great. And I always call John, like, he could have just made that the first draft, the one we got in an hour after you self-critiqued it.
Yeah, no, I need to be
No, you get
pushed into the
be
corner,
you.
man.
Yeah. So we're talking about how we feel about scores and competition coming back to the activity this year. It doesn't change. This is maybe why we don't win more often, but it doesn't change anything for me. I don't think it changes anything for any of us as far as how we approach stuff, because we do our thing. I mean, it's there. It's going to happen. I just don't see us talking about it ever when we're designing a show. And even during the season, it's such a little part of the experience for me. It's obviously important. It's something that happens. But for me personally, that is 5-10 minutes of my day on days where we have contests. And we are trying to be amazing and entertaining and all of those things. And it's going to get what it's going to get. You know what I mean? So last year, I'd be lying if it wasn't a little more relaxing, just because you didn't have to deal with the pressure of what is it on any given night. But I think the judges probably would tell you it was a little more relaxing for them not to have to deal with the pressure of giving that out all night. So I think we always want to have an element of trust with that they're doing their best job, we're doing our best job, and everybody's trying to get it right. I just don't think about judging a lot.
John always uses the word honest, and I think that sums it up, basically. Like, if you're making artistic decisions to, please a panel of people, then you're not an artist anymore, you're a politician. And I think we're all competitive people. I mean, I have 3 younger brothers, like, we fought over everything. So, and we enjoy that part of it. But I don't think it changes our process much. I mean, I like to think it doesn't.
Try to block it out.
Yeah,
to be honest with you.
just do your work,
You do.
man.
It's like, I respect what they're doing, and I know it's a hard job, and it's fun for fans, I imagine, all that.
I think that's what
coming
it's
back
for.
together.
I really
Yeah,
do.
it's really for the fans.
Yeah.
If you,
You know, that's a good point. It
Yeah.
really is. It really is something
Everyone
for the.
loves to hate the Russian judge figure skating,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, I just think about
Yeah.
the student performers, for those people who are watching something on Flow, and if you're watching results.
Yeah.
I said at BOA too. I mean, the only people that stay in the stands for the stuff at it is, especially when it's on the tour and you're just going to the next place. The kids are all in the lot getting snack and practicing, and I'm hanging with them. So half the time, more than half the time, I don't even know what happened. Yeah.
You spend so much time just to make your idea come to fruition, and we've all done drum corps long enough to know high execution of what you're doing. So that takes all the energy. And I mean, honestly, by the end, all the groups are phenomenal. So it's.
Yeah,
What you really want to do, because you've got such a great audience, so many people, you want to be the corps that affects them, in just a kick-ass way to support drum corps even more, and just the performers.
Yeah.
And if all of
Yeah.
them do that,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I think that's what you strive for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I think
it's
about
not- it's not
2019.
an easy answer
Yeah,
to-
like 2019 didn't win the DCI World Championship, but I would not have traded being a part of that energy every day. All summer, I kept thinking, I loved it. Like, this is what we get to do all summer, and they knew it. They got to be rock stars for a summer of their lives.
Sure
And
did.
so
moved a lot of
competition is
hurdles.
great. It's important. I mean, it is what drives the excellence in the activity. But I think if people were to see a true behind the scenes of any drum corps, other than the going into the critique, and you take it seriously, you do it. But it's like there's other things that you are worrying about, mainly the kids.
I think even the most competitive people in the activity, and we know them, would tell you that we've never figured out the perfect way to measure what we do. Yeah. And that, so, you just live with the results and, do honest work. And
we're all misunderstood, so there's that. We're on that.
we all grew up in groups where you only ever heard about mistakes. What you did wrong was punished, like on the score sheet. When we finally got rid of that, all the horn lines instantly sounded better the next year because they started focusing on tone and intonation and, crazy ideas like that. So, but I think when push comes to shove, I mean, the easiest thing to go to is comparing, you know, how many groups, you know, how many mistakes this group made versus this group, you know. So I think it's just a really tough thing to measure, you know. The Beatles show is a great example because a couple times there were judges on the field who told me that we had moved them to tears, you know, and then you look at the sheet and you go, that's not on there, you know. So then why were we third if we moved you that much? Like, what is this supposed to be about, man? It's supposed to be about music, right? So, and I'm not blaming anybody for that. It's just we haven't found the perfect way to measure it. Maybe there isn't one, you know, but you just have to keep it in perspective, man.
Yeah, there's still kind of a compulsory element that you see to the activity that, like, I'm glad our guys just don't write in that way. For me, music that starts with Stars and Stripes Forever. That just doesn't do it for me. So that gets into kind of the authenticity and the honesty of the way we try to approach it. And in transparency, there's probably options where we could have taken a compulsory route and certainly on certain moments and maybe checked a box or scored something, but no.
I'm trying to work a triple tonguing feature into ice castles right now. It's gonna be good, man.
Exactly. It's funny, I find myself gut checking me a lot when I'm up here, that I don't want to fall back into kind of pre-COVID things I took for granted.
Yep.
So that's the biggest thing for COVID for me is I'm trying not to forget the me I was when the world shut down and I was in the fetal position in my house washing down my cereal boxes and afraid to go outside. And honestly, I had convinced myself that this drum corps thing was never coming back, you know, and the worst of it. And I think about how in those moments I said to myself, just to be able to do it one more time, just to be a part of it, I won't, you know. And so when I find myself, because we are human, we're competitive, and when I find that element of my brain creeping up, I try to immediately take myself back to that, hey, this feels, the fact that I can feel that emotion of how are we going to compete? How's this going to go? You know, because I don't want to go back to just old habits that take all of this for granted. Every experience with the kids, every experience with my friends, and the dream that drum corps is. I mean, we're all here for all these years because we still love this. It's not for competition. It's not for winning. I love it because of the way I get to feel around these people and the way they make me feel, the way we make each other feel, and you know, the music we get to create, and the you know, the kind of what we get to do. That the circus is back together now and traveling, and I'm glad. Like, I'm glad I'm back on it. So, but it's definitely changed it. I think with every drum corps, by definition, a veteran, a true veteran, would have had to been somebody that marched in 2019, but was young enough to not age out by 2022. So I think about like Lance Pera in our guard, who Lance is an Avon kid who I've known since he was in the, you know, elementary school, and he was a rock star at Avon in our World Guard, and then he marched Santa Clara in 2019. Nothing happened in 2020. Last year he was with us, and now he's aging out with us. And I think about him specifically because, like, well, that's the kid. They had to be young enough to march 2019, which means they had to be good enough to make it in 2019, yet not age out in 2022. You know, and so the whole activity is changing over in many ways because I would imagine with a lot of these corps, you can just by definition, you're only going to have a handful of kids that did that. That's why I'm glad we fought through last year's experience. I'm so thankful that we did that. We didn't do that for us. We did that for drum corps and for these kids. It probably would have been the best thing for the Bluecoats financially, just to stand pat. Yeah. But we, you know, that really was like, come on. And I'm glad we did it because there are so many kids now that got to go through John's learning process in the Lucy show. So they're not veterans to maybe the competitive drum corps, but they're at least veterans to our experience. So, you know, I'm glad we did last year, and I'm glad we're back, but I'm not glad we're back for any reason other than I'm just glad to be on the road and doing this with my buddies.
Yeah. I feel like every day a new realization happens. And I don't mean that just like, you know, as words to say. I really feel like you don't totally. No. You just don't take anything for granted. I don't take anything for granted anymore. You know, it's one that it came back. And our performers are different, you know what I mean? They didn't come from the way, I mean, drum corps was humming along for years and years and years, years and years and years and years. You know what I mean? Of the same thing, and we would just a little bit get better and change things and stuff like that, and go with that and go with that and go with that, and then everything comes to a grinding halt. This is like a start over, and I don't think anything's going to go back to the way it was. I really don't. I think the ideas are going to be there, but I think the way we perceive those things is going to be different, and I honestly don't know what the effect of all that is. It's cool. It's cool. I can tell you honestly, it's taken, like by 19, the Bluecoats 19, those performers were crazy. They were amazing from day one.
Never had a bad night either.
Ever. I mean, they were just amazing, you know, and there's no way we're coming into this year with 2019 because of what Dean just said. You know what I mean? So it's taken, but our desire, our threshold, what we want is that. We come in kind of expecting that, but we have to build that back up again. And yeah, so you learn. You know, you learn by that process, and it's been amazing from day one to what Doug was talking earlier, to where these performers are 2 weeks in. It's like, holy crap. Yeah. So, and they all changed, you know what I mean? They all had 2 years off. Maybe they didn't work because they're so young, you know, they don't know what they were missing or something like that. That's, I mean, I feel like every day it's like, oh,
that's
and that
what's
too.
Exciting with all of the drum corps is talent is talent. Like, we have incredible talent, but then there's experience. And you know, I'm just even talking with some of my friends out in Santa Clara. It's just the realization of like, hey, you have to teach them everything. Here's how we two it up. Here's why we two it up. Here's why we set up an arc this way. Here's why we put our water jug. There's so many things you just took for granted because the wheel just kept spinning, and every year the new kids would just learn what it is. But when you have to, last year is when that hit me. When we had to just start from scratch on,
they were amazing.
I'm Dean. You know, that's Doug. This is the Bluecoats. And so I would say we're definitely, you know, it's not 2019 was just so veteran from an experience standpoint, and I'm just really glad we went through that last year, because this year there's always going to be a curve, but that's where I want to be there for my friends in these different parts of the world that are like, it's hitting them. They're having their last year moments this year of like, that's okay. They'll be better in a week, pal. You know, like, it's gonna be better in a week. Because that's what happened last year. Is week to week, it was like you were watching 2 weeks of growth in a drum corps season, and we learned lessons through that. I think even in
stronger in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
I think we teach smarter now because last year you had to put this thing together, and we tried to put it like a show. Like we really felt like that was any other show, but I think the fact that they could do, we just learned so many lessons that I see being applied this year to the way they do it. And I'm just thankful for those kids. And I remember looking last year going like, okay, this is different from 2019, but hopefully there's going to be some of these kids that are maybe a lead soprano now are going to be a second or a third with experience, you know, when things get back to normal. And I do think that happened. I look at my first impression of the color guard was like, okay, I don't know how much experience is out here, but there is talent. And I think there's an element of experience. And
well, they also had
through that pandemic.
they also had a winter.
Yeah.
Same with the percussion. You know, I mean.
Yes. Yeah. And if you were in the Avon Indoor Winds, you had a winter too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, totally. First goal is just to finish the show. Yeah. That'd be goal number one. Right now, that's stressful. I would love to create a show that the audience can connect to and the performers can connect to at the level that we kind of got used to drum corps being, but with these new perceptions that the performers have and that we have and stuff like that. I don't know really what that looks like, but I think it's going to be a pretty beautiful thing. So that, I want all that. I want the people to go crazy. I want the kids to experience that, but we're also kind of enlightened to everything. So I'm curious to see what that feels like in a beautiful way.
Same with me. Great experience for our members, our most important customer, and for the audience, obviously.
Yeah,
we got hoodies to move, man.
Yes, no doubt. Yeah, no, there's the dad and the band director in me that always first thinks the first goal is really simple. I want the kids to feel safe, valued, and loved from beginning to end, and that never changes here at the Bluecoats. Safe, valued, and loved. I want, because that's all any parent wants for their child. No parent is like, you better come home with a Jim Ott trophy or a Fred Sanford trophy. You know, they want your kid to feel safe and valued and loved.
We need a hunk of wood right there.
And then beyond that, I'm with them. I want every no matter where a fan's touch point is, if they have been following us for years or decades, or if this is the first time they're ever seeing a drum corps show, the same way I remember seeing a Cirque show for the first time. I want them to look at the Bluecoats and just go, wow, that is unlike anything I've seen or heard. That feeling of a different flavor of ice cream. And I think we've done a good job over the several years of, you never quite know what you're going to expect, but hopefully you know that you're going to expect a level of entertainment, excellence, engagement on all the levels, quality. But I hope that when they look at this one, the tune that's being played in the background is a great example of, when I look at that, I go like, I have never seen that before on a football field. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And we want that. And then we want those guys to walk away feeling that their lives have been profoundly changed for the better.